He's 28. He earns $95,000 a year. And tonight he's checking his bank account at midnight, sitting on the edge of a share house bed, in a suburb he can almost afford, eating leftovers because dinner out didn't make sense this week. He did everything right. So why does it feel like he's losing? Australia's median household wealth ranks among the highest on earth. That's not sentiment. That's an OECD figure. A country built on resource wealth, uninterrupted economic growth, and the quiet promise that effort would eventually be rewarded. And yet, rental queues stretch around city blocks. First home buyer numbers sit at historic lows. And something quieter than any statistic is moving through an entire generation. A feeling they can't name, can't argue against, and can't put down at the end of the day. This documentary doesn't promise answers. It promises the truth nobody is saying out loud. Look at him on paper. Income above the median. No gambling debt. No reckless spending. Employed, educated, disciplined. The exact profile of someone who was supposed to be okay by now. But the promotion didn't change the math. The raise disappeared into a rent increase that arrived 6 weeks later. He worked harder. He arrived at the same place. And that gap between what the numbers say and what the body quietly knows, that's where the anxiety lives. Not loud, not dramatic, just permanently there. The question surfaces slowly, almost too quietly to hear. Is this a personal failure? And here's where it starts to get uncomfortable. Because the answer most people land on, alone, at midnight, running the numbers again, is yes. There must be something I did, something I missed, something I should be doing differently. But this is where things quietly changed. Pull the lens back. One person becomes a million. Millions of Australians in their 20s and 30s are running the same race on a track that got longer while they were already running. No announcement. No warning. The finish line simply moved. Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. The median home now costs between 10 and 13 times the median income. Sit with that number for a moment. A generation ago, that ratio was 4. 4 times your annual salary. Still difficult, but visible. Something you could build toward. Something that felt like it existed in the same world you were living in. Nobody voted for the change. It just happened, slowly. Then all at once. While people were doing exactly what they were told. Save, work, wait, it'll come. Wages grew. That part is technically true. But purchasing power didn't follow. Rent, groceries, energy, insurance, all climbing faster than the pay slip, quietly and consistently year after year. The number went up. The life it could buy went somewhere else entirely. And that should have been enough to produce frustration. It wasn't, because there was another layer. And this one was harder to see. Open any social media feed on a Friday evening. Peers who appear to be thriving. Holidays, renovations, engagement rings. The life that was supposed to come next, appearing to have already arrived for everyone else somehow. What doesn't appear? The debt behind the image. The credit card funding the long weekend. The parents who quietly transferred the deposit. The invisible architecture holding up the visible life. So the feeling of falling behind gets processed as personal failure. Quietly. Repeatedly. Without anyone to correct it. The shame is real, and it runs deep. Young Australians are blaming themselves for a structural problem that was never theirs to solve, and that shame is doing damage that no savings rate can fix. It changes how people see themselves, what they think they deserve, what they believe they're capable of building. Then comes the comparison nobody prepared them for. The parents, who bought at the right time in the right decade, who sat on the sideline of the right property market, not through superior discipline or foresight, but through timing, who now hold assets worth millions, who offer advice that made perfect sense in 1987, delivered with complete sincerity and no awareness that the world it was designed for no longer exists. The gap between generations isn't bitterness. It's bewilderment. This is the part most people never say out loud. This isn't a money problem. It's a belief problem. A generation was handed a set of rules. Follow them faithfully and the life will come. They followed them, and the rules changed. Quietly, without acknowledgement, without apology. And the generation that trusted them was left holding the consequences of a bargain that had already been broken. The advice to just save harder starts to feel like being told to swim faster in a current that only runs one direction. And what happens when sustained effort stops producing results? What fills that space? Doesn't have a clean financial term. Psychologists are beginning to call it financial grief. Not anxiety, not stress, grief. The mourning of a version of life that was promised and is no longer accessible. The house, the stability, the ability to look 5 years ahead without the numbers collapsing. Not a fantasy, a reasonable expectation built on reasonable evidence that quietly became out of reach. The hopelessness isn't weakness. It's a rational response to an irrational system. And that realization that the feeling is accurate, not distorted, not a sign of something broken inside them, is the one that changes everything. Here's the twist nobody expects. The generation above them isn't villainous. They didn't design a trap. They benefited from timing. And many of them genuinely don't understand that their experience is no longer repeatable, that the conditions that built their wealth quietly ceased to exist, that the advice they're offering is a map to a place that no longer has a road in. The real enemy isn't any one generation. It isn't any single bank or landlord. It's a system that rewards existing wealth, that compounds advantage at the top and quietly taxes everything else, with enough slowness that it rarely produces a visible moment of injustice. Just pressure, accumulating, every month, without a face. And now a heavier question enters the frame. What happens to a society when an entire generation stops believing in the future? Not rhetorically, practically. What happens to workforce investment, to birth rates, to civic trust, to the quiet social contracts that hold communities together? When the people building a country decide, not out of apathy, but out of evidence, that planning ahead no longer makes sense. The ambition doesn't disappear. It goes underground. People stop trying to buy, then stop planning 5 years out, then stop expecting. The goal doesn't vanish. It just becomes something they no longer say aloud, too exposed, too likely to invite advice that stopped applying a decade ago. And something quieter moves in to fill the space. Spending on now. Not recklessness. Survival. The psychological need to feel like life is livable today when tomorrow has been sealed off by a system that was never redesigned for them. Then retirement enters the frame. And this is where the door quietly closes. Superannuation projections, projected cost of living. The numbers don't meet each other, not even close. And beneath that sits a reality that is only beginning to be spoken aloud. Millions of Australians will rent permanently. Not as a phase, permanently. In a country that built its entire social infrastructure on the assumption that everyone would eventually own. The tax system assumed it, the aged care system assumed it, the retirement model assumed it. Many won't own, and no one has built the alternative yet. The mental health data reflects all of it. Financial stress is now one of the leading drivers of anxiety and relationship breakdown in Australia. The cost is being paid invisibly off in every suburb at every age that was supposed to have figured it out by now. And the deepest realization, the one that sits quietly beneath every other one, is this. The hopelessness isn't pessimism. It's pattern recognition. Clear, accurate pattern recognition. And that's precisely what makes it so hard to argue against. You can't tell someone they're reading the situation wrong when the situation keeps proving them right. Return to him. Nothing has changed. The rent is still too high. The deposit still feels like another life. The raise still dissolved before he could feel it in anything real. But something has shifted in how he carries it. Less shame, more clarity. The problem has a name now, a shape, a history that started long before he arrived and will continue long after tonight. He's not performing optimism. He's not convincing himself it gets better. He's just trying to stay present in a life that feels like it's permanently on hold. And that, for now, is the most honest thing he can do. Outside, the city keeps moving. Trams, construction cranes building apartments most locals will never afford to live in. Coffee queues full of people carrying the same quiet weight past each other every morning without a word. One statistic, no commentary. Home ownership among Australians under 35 has fallen to its lowest point since records began. And one question, left without an answer because there isn't one yet. What kind of country do we become when the people building it can no longer afford to live in it?